Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I'm sitting here stunned and moved. When you hear these morning Pastor Gary Live segments, you are a week behind where I am. I wrote the ones for this week last week, and this week I'm working on next week. So in the midst of my writing these morning moments last week, the ELCA assembly had begun in Columbus, Ohio. The story is way too complex to go into here, but long story short, within the past year, a situation arose in Northern California in which a pastor, the synod bishop, the synod council, and eventually the ELCA bishop acted in ways that were profoundly hurtful to a Latin American congregation there. Truthfully, I don't believe there were many options that could have come out good, but there were certainly things that happened that were profoundly hurtful. One of the things that this whole situation pointed out to us again is that systemic racism still exists, not just in society, but even in the church. I had written yesterday's reflection and then paused a moment to tune into the live stream of the ELCA assembly and stumbled into watching our presiding bishop publicly apologizing to the members of that community, repenting of wrongdoing, and committing herself and our church to greater and intentional action to overcome our intrinsic and active racism. She humbly and plainly asked the leaders of that congregation for forgiveness. With tears, they forgave and joined her call for accountability. It was a profound moment and powerful. This week we are talking about forgiveness and looking at the stages of forgiveness that Lewis Smedes outlines in his book, Forgive and Forget. And what we learned yesterday is that the hurts have to be personal, real, and deep. And that leads to the second stage of forgiveness that Smedes calls we hate. Smedes opens his chapter with these words: hate is a tiger snarling in the soul. Hate is our natural response to any deep and unfair pain. Hate is our intrinsic, instinctive backlash against anyone who wounds us wrongly. When a hurt is personal, real, and deep, hate happens. We may harbor a passive hate that is more like a dismissal of the other person. In other words, we want nothing to do with them, and we want nothing to do with wishing well for them either. There is also an active hate we sometimes respond with, where we take action to seek to hurt back the other person and to be an agent of opposition to him or her. All this is different from anger. Anger often spurs us to creative resolution of a situation. Hate doesn't want to change things for the better, but rather to make things worse. As Smedes says, anger is a sign that we are alive and well. Hate is a sign that we are sick and need to be healed. I'm sure you've heard the old line, hate the sin but love the sinner. The problem is that when it comes to personal, real, and deep hurts, we struggle to do that. When we are hurt, it is only natural for us to hate the person who hurt us. Unfortunately, so very often the person who hurt us is or was someone close to us, making things even more painful and continued relationships strained and difficult. Most of us try to hide our hate and tamp it down, but Smedes thinks that an honest admission of that hate to oneself is a healthy step toward healing and forgiveness. We need to admit the reality of the situation. And what is worse, harbored hate acts inside us like a cancer, eating away at our soul. As I shared earlier, Smedes opened this chapter by saying, "Hate is a tiger snarling in the soul." Corrie ten Boom was imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp in World War II. After she was released, she became a Christian and wrote of her experience and her faith. At times, she was confronted by some of the very soldiers who had imprisoned her. After her long struggle with forgiveness, she wrote, "To forgive someone is to set a prisoner free, and to discover that the prisoner was you." Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.